Hi guys, welcome to the Creative BS. The BS stands for Business Student, but this is the first time that we're having like a video interview. Usually it's just blog posts, but I recently was allowed to use this studio for free after taking some courses, so why not utilize it? Today we have my good friend Amanda Huang. She actually used to be a data analyst, a researcher at Fox, and our website's about entertainment, so why not talk to someone who did some amazing stuff in entertainment? Just to give a little bit of background, so she went to Macaulay Honors College at the City University of New York, and she studied marketing. And she was a research analyst at Fox Broadcasting Company, but now she was promoted to associate manager. And now she is at JP Morgan as an associate for compensation analytics and strategy. So, Amanda, is there anything else you'd like to add to your background?
Pretty much covered it, yeah. Big change.
Yeah, so Amanda and I, we actually met when I was a sophomore. You were already working at that point.
Wow, you're young.
Yeah, I was. We met through a friend named Park. Hi, Park Hyung. Hopefully you're watching. But Park and I were in boxing together, and you and Park were
Went to high school together.
Yeah, you guys went to high school, and she was visiting, and I thought it was really cool that she was working at Fox. She was telling me about like all the ratings at Simpsons and stuff like that. So I don't know. I was like, this is cool. But yeah, we just kept in touch since then, and she's been a very great friend for me. She also helped me a lot, just in general about this industry, but also in life because I just started my first job. So
you know more about this industry than me.
Oh no, what are you talking about? But yeah, again, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so enough about me. We're going to talk a little bit about you and what your job does, because we have a lot of viewers who actually don't know, who are either in the industry or not, but are interested in learning more about things, because I also have friends who are actors and artists who might want to know, how does data work? Let's start with just a general question. Can you give a bit of a rundown of what you did as a research analyst?
Sure. So before I get into that, whenever I tell people that I worked at Fox, you kind of like get this reaction from people that you can read immediately, and it's because there's a certain connotation there because people hear Fox and they think of Fox News or Fox Business. And I just want to clarify that I worked for Fox Broadcasting, which falls under Fox Entertainment, and you've already alluded to some of the shows like The Simpsons or MasterChef. So again, just worked in entertainment.
Yeah.
And within research, really what you're doing is helping the company make strategic decisions backed by numbers. So our clients were all internal. They would be the C-suite people. They would be production, development, finance, publicity, scheduling. And it was really helping them understand at the most basic level how our shows were doing, trying to gauge the health of them, and how that compared with the other broadcast networks, so ABC, CBS, NBC, and to a lesser extent, CW. So we were looking at nightly viewership. We look at viewership trending throughout the entire season and over the course of a couple of years. So look at, is the show growing in viewership or is it declining? If it's declining, is that natural for the entire landscape, or is there something wrong with one of our shows?
Yeah.
Or if there was a show that was ticking up, not even on our network, but on another network, we would study that and try to figure out why. Does it have to do with something inherent about the show or the plot itself, or the characters, the actors, or was it a product of scheduling? Or maybe there was a gap that was in the industry that another network saw and they took advantage of.
Yeah, because it's interesting that you say that you also have to look at the other trends, because a lot of people are no longer subscribed to cable. So if everyone's going down, it's kind of hard to say that it's Fox's show's fault. It could just be affecting everyone.
Exactly, and this is true of numbers anywhere. Like without context, like you don't really understand if something's good or bad. Like if I told you something did a 5 rating, like someone who doesn't have that background, they would be like, okay, is that good?
Yeah. So like when you say ratings, like what kind of stuff do you look at? Is it literally the number of people you watch the number of people who watch, or maybe even like the number of people who watch like the ads or something? But is it all about eyeballs, or are there other things going on?
So the industry is driven by advertising, that's how the companies make their revenue. So there is a focus on commercials, obviously, but there are separate ratings for the program itself and then with commercials only, which we just call commercial ratings. So a rating is basically, it just tells you like what percentage of the population, the TV population, people with TVs are tuning into a show, how many people who are currently have their TVs on or watching a certain show. But we also obviously will look at like time shifted viewing too. So we look at within 3 days, we look at within 7 days, and we also look at digital data. So I would look at Fox Now, I would look at Hulu viewership, video on demand, and now, I mean, Nielsen provides all these metrics, and that's changing too with the environment. Like now that we're seeing more time shifted viewing and more binge watching, like you'll even see like plus 35 days. And Nielsen's also like trying to measure some digital viewership too, but that's a really complicated space.
Yeah, it can get things, there's a lot of data points to look at, and it can get calculated.
Yeah.
You've been in actually multiple industries, I guess. So you're at Time for a while. Now you're at JP Morgan. So, and I know you just started your job, but have you been noticing some differences in doing research from those industries to television?
Yes and no. So I've always thought of research as a very industry agnostic skill. That is to say that if you have the skills to look at data and spot trends and know what are the right questions to ask and be able to visualize it for other people who don't have an analytical background or a numbers background, I think that will take you much further. I think that it's much easier to teach someone an industry and the metrics than it is to teach them those kinds of analytical skills.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, numbers are numbers.
Yeah, that's how I think about it.
It doesn't matter how many people are buying milk or how many people are buying your VOD assets. So that's really cool. It's cool to learn that, you can kind of transition back and forth. But, I mean, would you say there are maybe like those subtle things that help you? Just if you just know what shows are, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to know the industry, right? You got to know what metrics they're into. Like, if you want to go into TV, you should know that Nielsen is the #1 provider for all that stuff. You should know what a rating is and how that's measured, what the methodology is.
Yeah. But I'm sure a lot of people just have a general knowledge of, more viewership, hit certain demographics and stuff like that. Okay, cool. But how did you become interested in research and analytics?
I think, well, in college, like you had mentioned, I studied marketing, and more specifically, I had done the advertising track, and I thought it was going to work in an agency. I thought it was going to be a Mad Men type of thing.
Okay.
But after a few internships, I realized that I didn't really want to do that.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me, but I did, based on my marketing internships, I realized that what I liked most about those were whenever I got to look at the numbers.
Oh, okay.
And I liked seeing, like, when we did A/B testing, like what worked and what didn't and why. It wasn't just about like the creative for me. It wasn't just about trying to like convert people or anything. And after a few more internships, that just kind of cemented the idea that I did want to work with numbers. And in hindsight, I've always been really good with numbers, like always really strong in math. I would do logic puzzles for fun as a kid.
How are you doing on your LSAT?
But it was just like that kind of thinking, like it just fit my personality really well, I think. And I just took a few more jobs, internships doing that. And then when I was looking for full-time jobs, I spent a lot of time just reading job descriptions. Just to tell you like what the day-to-day responsibilities were, and I found that I got most excited by the research ones.
Nice, interesting. Yeah, like for me, so I studied information and operation information management, and the reason why I liked that course was because there's like an entry-level like Excel course, and I took it and I loved Excel. I was like, I felt like a god that tells numbers what to do, and like I can be like, oh, let's try this. Oh, what does this mean? Like you have like 3 different conditions, and the combinations each mean stuff, and you filter stuff in and out, pivot tables, all that stuff. So I mean, I loved it. And like when I was interning too, like I would always ask for more like analytical stuff because I don't know, if I sit down and I'm with Excel, like I can go for like 3 hours and like I don't feel tired. It's a lot of fun. So that's really cool. But data is fun. It is. It's like magic,
That's how I kind of think of it. I think if you're the kind of person who's always asking like, what if, or like, why did this happen? Like,
Yeah.
this might be a field that you would want to explore.
Yeah, and also knowing the code is pretty cool. But speaking of code, so what kind of software did you use at your company as a research analyst? I guess I'm asking kind of like, is it more like, you know, Tableau and Excel, or is it more like Python and R and stuff like that?
So Excel was by far the most used program that we used. I was in that all day.
Okay.
But it's also just what most people, I think, are comfortable seeing. So it was easy for me to manipulate an Excel sheet and send it off to an executive. Like, it didn't take much explaining beyond that. I started to use Tableau a little bit, but then that was more exploratory for myself. It wasn't standard at the company. It's also like a relatively new piece of software.
Yeah.
But for what I was doing, it just wasn't conducive to that kind of work. Because if you're looking at ratings and trends, like, you don't really need any fancy visualizations for that beyond like bars or like line graphs.
It's like a 3D graph of viewership.
Yeah,
like
so it really depends on the industry and like what questions you're trying to answer. But that is a very popular one, and there are some courses for that, free courses too, for people who are interested in learning that. I think that's a really, really good skill to add. R and Python and SQL, I learned a little bit on my own, but the data systems databases have to be set up at your company for you to be able to use those, right? So I personally didn't use it in my old jobs. I'm using SQL a lot more in my new job, and I know that some other media companies do have those systems in place for them to use it. So I think out of those, SQL would probably be the most useful one. But going back to Excel, I self-taught myself how to code in Excel using VBA, which was just extremely useful for Excel itself, especially if you have the type of job where you're creating recurring reports daily, weekly, monthly. Like, it saves you so much time. And our team wouldn't have had the capacity to support all the groups we did if we didn't have those. And it's an extremely marketable skill for any company, especially because Excel is still like the most used tool.
So for some of our viewers who aren't really Excel experts, so VBA is kind of like the coding language for Excel. And I'm sure a lot of people know what Excel is, like spreadsheets, like numbers, organizing that stuff. But VBA, you can kind of code routines. And what's nice is that those are called macros, and you can actually record macros as well. So like let's just say, for example, you have to copy and paste 2,000 times. Instead of you sitting there pressing Control-C, Control-V, you can literally type something like Control-V, Control-C, Control-V multiplied 2,000 times, like something like that, and it will do that automatically for you. So if you love Excel, look into VBA. It's pretty intuitive, and you can also record yourself, and it will automatically code what you recorded, and you can like adjust things there. But yeah, okay, so I guess you're saying like for these types of jobs, you know, you don't have to be a coder. You know, you can kind of go along with like Excel more. Lower level, higher level. I forget which one of those guys. I took a comp sci course. I should know this, but more user friendly. And like you said, their department should support it, and also it should be easy to send to executives.
But I think just coding overall, like for VBA, you don't really need any formal training in that. It's like you said, it is intuitive. You just kind of have to be able to follow the logic, which not everyone's able to do. But for people who did logic puzzles as a kid, or like really love solving like math problems and were always good at it, they could probably pick it up very easily.
A lot of ifs thens. Make sure you don't have too many embedded ifs. So what kind of problems did you have to solve, or what kind of questions were you asked while you're doing research?
I mean, we were always asked like, how did this show do, especially if it was a brand new show premiering for its first episode, or a hyped up returning show. Or we would get asked like, who was the top demographic for this show? Was it the #1 show of the night? We always got asked that because the trades always send out like how every network did overnight, and we like always went to go at the best story. Like, we were #1 in this demo. Like, we've been #1 for the last 3 weeks or something like that.
So, like you said, so the question you got to ask is, how did the show do? How do you approach that question?
I always hated getting that question because it's just so broad.
It seems simple, right? But like, a lot of people watch our show. What do you want?
So the one thing about working research is you quickly get to realize that people sometimes don't really know what they're asking. They just ask questions, and you have to try and figure that out. So It would really depend on who we were getting the question from. So if it was from publicity, how do we do? They clearly wanted to know if we were number one for the night and what the best press points were so that they could send it out. If it was someone in like pricing and planning, they're more concerned about the revenue dollars and how the commercials were placed. So we don't get commercial ratings for another few weeks after, but you get a good sense of what that will look like based on the overnight program ratings. So for them, if a show did really well, like they would want to know so we could adjust the future episodes so they could properly price out the rate cards for the ads for later on. So it starts off like, how do I approach it with just figuring out the audience and like what they're really looking for. And then also you could just provide like really high level stuff. Like it did this rating overnight, resonated with these audiences. We would also do budgeting for the show. So we try to estimate like where they would fall. So if like finance was coming out with that question, we would tell them that this was within like 0.5 of our estimate or something like that.
When you mean budgeting, you don't mean, do you mean like actual production budget?
No. Well, I think it could feed into the production budgeting, but I didn't really get much insight into that side of the business.
So you were looking more at the corporate budget of things, or whose budget, I guess, or unless you can.
I mean, for us, it would be like we would send it to finance, like we would send ratings to them, and then they would put together like production and stuff. So they would combine things from different sources and then kind of figure that out. So, for example, like a certain show has to do a certain rating in order for it to make sense for the company to pick up or not.
So if it doesn't bring money, why have it on?
Exactly, and it varies by show, and for many different reasons. Like it could be contracts for the talent, it could be whether or not it's from an outside studio. So a very famous example was when Fox canceled Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yes, I love that show.
I love that show too. I took it very personally. I put together a whole PowerPoint deck on why Fox should renew the show. I'm not kidding. Well, along with my team, but yeah. So
interesting.
All my friends would be like, Amanda, why are you canceling Brooklyn Nine-Nine? And I would be like, I'm not doing it. Like, but then I would also tell them, like, it's from an outside studio. It's from Universal, which is owned by NBC. So it's costing us a lot of money. Whenever we put it up in delayed viewing, like, I think the contract had it that they would get more of the money, so we didn't really make that much beyond live or live plus same day viewership.
And with Hulu and everything, it's kind of hard for that too.
Exactly. And more money is brought in from linear traditional television, like watching on a TV set, than it is through digital, like watching on your phone or watching on a computer, right? So it just didn't make sense for us to renew the show again, and finance hated the show because they always said it was bleeding us dry, because it would pull in like 0.6, 0.7 live plus same day ratings, which are very low for comedies, despite it being a really good show. The digital numbers were there, but it just didn't make sense for us. Then NBC picked it up like not that long after, and everyone was like, yay, like they're the best, they saved the show. But it made sense for them because it's from their sister studio. So they don't spend as much. Exactly. They don't have to go pay another studio.
I remember being on Reddit, and a lot of people were like, oh, NBC's the savior, and like, I remember you telling me the story when it happened, and I'm like, people don't look at the numbers and the actual.
They don't know. You can't blame
but if
them.
you go to like Wikipedia and stuff, it literally says produced by like NBC, so like they're making it. But okay, that's really interesting. But I did want to ask, actually, this is something that I'm still not 100% sure on, but why is it hard to make money off of digital? Is it because like it's harder to get ratings? Because we have like Nielsen for linear cable, but is that why, or are there other reasons that you could elaborate on?
So I can't talk too much about the financial aspect of it, but I can talk about what I know about the viewership of it. It's very rare. I would have to think very hard to see if I can even think of an example for a certain episode to garner more viewers on digital than it is on linear. And I say that I should caveat that with the fact that we're talking about broadcast here, because I used to work in broadcast. So for those who don't know, like everyone has access to broadcast. If you have a TV, if you have like an antenna, you can watch all these shows. So you can think of it as like your local stations that have your news, but then again, your ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. Whereas cable, you have to pay like a subscription fee every month for it.
Yes.
So that's like your HBO, your FX, your Showtime, your Cartoon Network kind of thing. So for broadcast, because everyone has access to it, it reaches a much broader audience.
Yes.
And you're going to get a much larger viewership for that. So the viewership on linear television versus digital, the piece of the pie that linear makes up is going to be a lot bigger.
Oh, okay.
Because a lot of people are already watching it on TV because it's either for free or it could be on digital. Like there's just also a lot more noise.
Yes.
So you have literally tens of thousands of options to choose from when you're watching online versus when you're watching on your TV, like maybe 50 shows air at 8 p.m., right?
Yes.
So there's that too.
There's this dispersion.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. It's interesting to hear because a lot of people think that like Netflix and Hulu and everyone, they're like taking over and that nobody's watching cable, but if you look at the numbers, it's still making a lot of money. I mean, same thing if Viacom, like, yeah, linear cable's still making, or cable is still making a lot of money, so it's not just gonna disappear in like 2 years or anything like that.
And the other part of it is what you said, that it's hard to measure viewership on digital, and again, we go back to the ads aspect of it. So when you're on broadcast, in most cases, there are some regional ads, but in most cases, the ads are airing nationwide. So you can charge like an absurd amount of money for a 30-second spot because it's getting broadcast across the whole nation. Whereas for online, it's programmatic buying now, right? It's trying to like figure out who your audience is and then dynamically serving them ads based off of that. So if you and I are watching the same show at the same time, we're going to see different ads because they're trying to figure out like what ads we would best respond to.
Do you guys look at like YouTube analytics or anything, or like Facebook video stuff? Do you guys do that, or is there like a separate
There was a
team?
separate team that was doing it when I was there.
Oh, okay. And when you were doing these research, what were some limitations that you had, or I guess like what are some questions that like are just really hard to answer or like almost impossible to answer?
Sure. So for this one, I like to give an example for when Roseanne came back on air, right? Numbers blew up, like they were insane.
Really?
And everyone was trying, like no one really expected that, and everyone was trying to figure out like why did it do so well? And so my team across both New York and LA like rushed to put together a deck for the executives, and we came up with a bunch of things like, oh, there's a nostalgia aspect of it, but you can't really measure that, right? Then we looked at, oh, it resonated really well with middle America, and most scripted television that airs targets liberals or people who live in cities more. So that's an area too. And you can tell that it indexed higher in those areas, but still you can't really say like this contributed to it like 30% or that was 50%. So whenever these questions come up, like you can always like provide reasons that might contribute to it, but it's hard. You can't really contribute it to one thing entirely, right? Like
the numbers are there, but the connotation of that is difficult. Interesting.
Like correlation is not the same thing as causation kind of thing.
Okay, very interesting. And I would like to thank Victor Lee for asking that question. And hey, if you guys check out the website, please leave comments or questions. I will definitely read them and ask people. So, you know, I've asked some friends and I got some pretty good feedback, so keep in touch. Also, just short plug here, we do have a Twitter account. It's at @TheCreativeBS. I never advertised it because I was still figuring out what I want to do with it. Tweet me questions. I can see if I have friends in the industry of that position. So if you're curious about script writing, let me try to get some writers on the show. So tweet us.
Definitely do it. He knows a lot of people.
I do. I can do this show for years. I guess I know you mentioned a couple cases, but were there like any other interesting cases that you worked on while you were there? And were there any insights from that you can share?
So I think my favorite project that I've worked on was one that didn't necessarily come out from any specific group, but one that my manager had brought up just in musing one day, and we decided to dive into it, and we all had a lot of fun with it.
Okay.
So this was back when Fox still had New Girl. So this was a few years back.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have any other live action comedies.
Okay.
Well, there was New Girl and Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah.
But Fox has been known historically for its comedy brand with animation. And for a short while, we did pretty well with live action when we had also New Girl, but also like the Mindy Project in there. But it was a space that we were struggling with because I forget the exact number, but there were somewhere between like I think 5 to 7 live action comedies that we had picked up to air, and then were canceled.
Oh.
And New Girl and Brooklyn Nine-Nine were nearing the end of their life cycles, like it was season like 5 or 6 or something, right? And that was gonna be like a blank space for us. Like, what do we do now? Do we just completely get rid of our brand? But then it would be hard to build up again. So what we did was we did a deep dive into ABC, CBS, and NBC's strategies, and we did case studies from them over the last few years. So, for example, like NBC used to have The Office and Parks and Rec. It was like the second coming of like a golden age for comedy for them, right? And then when those ended, they kind of lost their comedy brand. What CBS did was like they built theirs up slowly with The Big Bang Theory, since that was such a ratings monster, and then would just pair their new shows with The Big Bang Theory for a bit. And then when they were ready to introduce a new one, they would move that show to its own time slot to be an anchor, and then just keep buffering new shows between 2 shows that have been around for a while,
so
which is a really smart strategy.
Kind of carrying them like a newborn baby and its
mother. It's nurturing them.
Interesting.
Which is something that Fox didn't really do, and we told them in this deck. We were like, if we want shows to succeed, we need to nurture them.
Interesting.
And then we also graphed ratings trajectories by season for a bunch of comedies across these 4 networks. And we saw that a lot of comedies, or the ones who would last really long, would peak in their 3rd seasons, which again showed that comedies need to be nurtured. You can't expect it to just be great coming out of the gate, right? Comedies have to find their stride, find their voices. And then there's the case of ABC, where they kind of just introduced an entire night of brand new shows all at once, which is like kind of crazy when you think about it, because that's just like, let's just like throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks kind of deal. And it's like really ballsy, but it ended up working for them because they had, well, they still have Modern Family. They had Cougar Town, which went on for a bit. Not every show makes it, but stuff like that was really, really fun to work on. Just looking back at historical cases and see what could inform history. It's really fun to look at trends over a period of time instead of just looking over, you know, a lot of people on TV are obsessed with just like the latest season because they want to get what's hot. They want to get in it now. I think people also notice that like every year there's kind of like the new shows that come up are always like fall within like one specific category. Like I think 2 seasons back there were a lot of like military or like cop-like shows, and then it just kind of seems like every network's airing the same thing, and then like none of them like really make it either. Like after This Is Us did really well, like everyone poured their money into like creating like these like sappy like family type of dramas, but it's like you can't really like be reactive, right? You kind of have to be more proactive. Like you want to be the first one in the space. You can't, it's hard to take that away from someone when they already have such a strong contender in there.
Yeah, because like if someone comes out with a cool and innovative idea, a lot of people are going to attach to that. And by the time other shows come out, they're going to be like, well, I'm already watching this. Like, why don't I watch that?
Exactly.
So first mover advantage, second mover advantage, business concepts, just letting you know. I actually wrote about that too in my other blog post. So if you're curious about what those are, check it out. Let's see. So how do you do like research of other competitors? Like, are there a lot of research out there, or do you literally just go on their website and check stuff? How do you check your competitors?
So again, we use Nielsen for everything. So for Nielsen, for linear ratings, again, like we had access to every network, both on broadcast and cable. When I was leaving, Nielsen was developing a digital viewership that let you look at Hulu and then like I think viewership, but it was only on certain devices. Like I think it was computer and mobile. And if your company offered up the data, so if like Fox offered up like their data to be measured, then they would also have access to the other network's data.
Okay.
I never got to see the final form of that though.
That's cool. So like they kind of like share with each other, because I'm sure it's helpful for everyone.
Yeah, because again, like you want that context, right, to figure out if something's like doing well or not. And then for the new pilots that get picked up, every year, right before the upfronts, or around the upfronts, we would already know which shows each network ordered pilots of, and then we would get to watch all of them.
Okay.
Before they figured out like what got placed on the schedule.
Interesting.
So we would get to see like which ones actually made it to air, which ones didn't, which ones got renewed for another season. And then like it was during that time where you would see that like every network kind of like was ordering like similar genres, or you would read in the trades that there's like one script that multiple networks were bidding on, and then you could see like how that ended up turning out.
Oh, so you actually get to see those early processes?
Or
are
we
they
got
in
to see
Nielsen?
the pilots.
Oh, okay, you got to see the pilots.
Yeah.
Where did you get to see the bidding stuff? Like, is it on Nielsen?
It would be on like Deadline or Hollywood Reporter.
okay.
Usually, because the Hollywood Reporter, and I think Deadline has one too, has like a running list of pilots that are ordered.
This season.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then they actually like will cross out like which ones made it to air. It's like a scorecard kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I saw like the 2019 season lineup on the Hollywood Reporter. I was also surprised how many of them were pretty similar.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great resource for people who are kind of curious of how the trends are. So check out those websites. So did you actually have well, not maybe you, but like your team have a say in which shows get developed or continued and things like that?
We gave our input, but we didn't really have like a final say, I guess.
Okay, so you provide the numbers.
Yeah, so it would be really high-level people making these decisions.
Like how high?
Like heads of development, heads of drama, heads of comedy, and then like the CEOs themselves.
Oh, okay. So and I guess they would also look at other research groups as well around the.
So like going back to Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like we had put together that deck, and I was told that at that time, before the whole like Fox Disney acquisition thing, Fox Broadcasting had two CEOs.
Okay.
And I was told that one of them was like totally supportive of bringing Brooklyn Nine-Nine back, and like referenced our deck, and like we would send things to them. But it's tough because I mean, everyone. Maybe this is being like a little bit cynical, but I think it's totally true. Like every department kind of thinks they're the best at their own job, right?
Yeah.
So people, I think, who are like in development, they might just be like, oh, these like numbers don't mean anything. Like this show's gonna do so well because of this, or that.
Yeah.
But then we'd be like, no, the numbers aren't there. Like you should listen to them. So we'd give our input. We would do our best for what we thought was legitimately in the best interest of the company, of course. But it was not always followed. But to be fair, there's a lot of considerations that go into it. Like there could be contracts, there could be just building relationships with other clients. And Hollywood relationships are huge, so sometimes you just want goodwill.
So I guess you do work with development and production a lot. How can so I am a writer, and I have a lot of writer friends as well, but how can they kind of know what's trending, or how can they like kind of keep an ear close by? I don't know, do you have any tips or advice for that, like where they can look information for? Or maybe they should just watch a lot of TV and figure out what's going on?
I think a little bit of both of those. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about how sometimes you'll notice that every network's ordering shows of like a similar genre, right? If you can like figure out where there's like a black space, then that could do very well for you. For example, Game of Thrones is in its final season.
Yeah.
After Game of Thrones ends, there's going to be this open space for like a fantasy drama, right? I mean, I guess you kind of have Lord of the Rings coming from Amazon, but still like on traditional television. Sci-fi traditionally hasn't done too well on broadcast, but every once in a while there is something that will pop for a little bit. There could be an empty space with the Big Bang Theory ending for a sort of like multicam friendship drama, comedy. So I guess just like seeing what, again, has historically done well and then isn't currently like on now.
Okay. So kind of seeing like, what's going to come next, or what's going to supplement that need, that empty void.
You don't want to come up with something where there's already like an oversaturation of it, right? Like you don't want to come up with like a reality dating show because there are so many of those going on and they do so well. Like you're not going to try and compete against The Bachelor.
Okay, interesting. But so just like beyond like professional questions, just personally, like How did you like working at Fox? How was it? You know, I saw you went to Studio in California and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, like, how was it? How was working at Fox?
I loved working there. It was really cool and really special to be able to work for a company and to work on shows that I grew up watching.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of surreal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I see SpongeBob every morning, so it's like...
Right?
Yeah.
And there is like, I mean, granted I was in Excel all day, but still, like, that was fun for me. But to other people, there's kind of this romantic aspect when you tell people that you work in TV. They're like, oh my God, that's so cool, because everyone can relate to it.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, and it's something that you're genuinely interested in every day, and even when you leave work, like, you still, like, think about it and, like, talk about it.
Because our roles are still business roles.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, we get to go to maybe our lobby is a little prettier with all these big statues and stuff like that, but yeah, we're sitting in offices, like we're sending out emails, we're scheduling meetings and stuff like that.
I mean, your offices are a lot cooler than the Fox New York offices.
It is a pretty office. I see Times Square right outside my window, but yeah, it does. It is interesting. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is a business. So again, you don't have to have these like creative skills to enter this industry. Like at least on the business side. Of course, if you're going to like production or actually being a designer, that's a different story. But you know, if you have the skills, like apply for the job and do it.
Yeah, and it's a nice way to like marry what you're good at with what you're interested in. Like I was interested in TV. I wouldn't say I was like good at TV before. I was like good at numbers, right? And it's just, there are more jobs out there than you really realize. Like before I started applying to full-time jobs, I didn't realize research analyst was a role. And if I had that information earlier, I would have tried to have done more internships in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like also like I didn't really know what jobs were out there until I was working full time, because like 3 months internship, it's hard to know what's going on really. But so on that topic, we actually have a lot of students who read my blog. We also have a lot of people like outside of the industry. I don't know. Do you have any advice for people who are curious about joining at research or analytics, like? What skills should they work on? You know, what kind of news sources should they read? Anything, or just anything, just life in general. Do you have any advice for people?
Yeah, I think, especially when you're a student, I think one of the best things you can do is reach out to people just on LinkedIn or friends of friends and just ask them to get coffee and ask them questions and pick their brain, I think. And the reason...
Or read my website.
Or read your website. The reason I say especially when you're a student is that I think that everyone's more or less been in that position where they're a student, they don't know what they want to do. So I think they're more likely to help students versus someone who's 3 or 4 years out of college. Although I'm not saying people like wouldn't be.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it's kind of like if you're in college, it would be weird if a junior is asking a senior, what classes should I take?
That's a very good...
But if like a high school kid or a freshman was like, I don't know what I'm doing, the senior you is like, oh, you're adorable.
Exactly.
But if you're a junior, it's like, huh? I mean, again, I'm sure a lot of people would still help, but there's that connotation there.
Yeah, and just reading trades, like knowing what's going on in the industry. Like if you want to work in TV, regardless if you want to work in production and development or if you want to work in finance or research, like you should know what are the shows that are on each network right now, both the company that you want to be at and its direct competitors, and also like how they're doing. Yeah. You want to know what the landscape looks like. You don't, but this is like general advice that you would have for like anywhere that you interview with. So. Can
you see ratings online, like kind of just generally, or is it only through like purchased reports?
That's a good question. So for Nielsen, you have to subscribe to it. You have to pay a hefty fee. I don't even want to like think about how much it is. But in the trades that report on it every day, like it's out there.
They read it and they give them a summarized version.
And there are certain websites that specifically focus on the numbers and not just reporting the stories.
Could you like?
Yeah, like TV by the Numbers is a really good one. They have a chart for like the top numbers every day. Deadline and Hollywood Reporter cover the entire industry, but they'll have tags for their posts that say like ratings or something. And if you just filter on that one, that's a really good one.
Okay, great. All right, so quick speed round questions. What's your favorite show?
The Simpsons.
Favorite movie?
Ooh, Titanic.
Titanic, okay. Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
No.
Okay. What's your parents' best dish? Your mom's or your dad's?
My dad doesn't really cook, so ooh, that's tough. I don't know if it's her best dish, but it's what I like the most. It's lobster.
You like your lobster,
That's
okay.
just because I like lobster.
Celebrity crush?
It used to be Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay.
Hence Titanic.
Yes.
Now he's gotten kind of old.
Okay.
Can it be fictional?
Sure.
Dumbledore.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Where's your favorite place to hang out in New York?
I don't really do much hanging out.
Okay,
now.
outside
I
of New
work
York.
too much.
Do you hang out? Where's your favorite place to hang out? Maybe at home. Wait, were you raised here?
Sorry?
Were you raised here?
I was raised in New
Okay,
York.
so I guess this is home. Yes.
I mean, when I have time, I like going to Central Park. Oh no, Governor's Island.
Governor's
But
Island.
that's only open
Okay.
certain months.
All right. Well, that is about time. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for you guys for watching. Welcome to the Creative BS. It's a website where we try to explain like business concepts to artists, but also artistic concepts to business people, like kind of being that bridge. You know, I went to business school, but I write, I do fight choreography, I do directing. So I thought it's a fun place to be, to learn about from each other. And I definitely want to bring more amazing guests like Amanda. So please check out the website. It is www.thecreativebs.com. BS stands for business student. Also check us out on Twitter. And yeah, thank you so much, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.